The phone call came just as I was wrapping up a long day at work. The hum of the office had finally quieted, and I was tidying up my desk, mentally preparing to head home. My phone buzzed on the desk, and seeing my wife's name on the screen brought a smile to my face. It wasn't unusual for her to call around this time, often to remind me to pick up something on my way back or to ask how my day had been. "Hey, love," I answered, the warmth in my voice instinctive. I was just about to head out. "What's up?" Her tone, when she replied, was cold. So cold it sent a chill through me. "Nathan, I need to talk to you." I paused, my smile fading. "Is everything okay?" "No," she said bluntly. "I want a divorce." The words hit me like a freight train, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. Divorce? The words sounded foreign, misplaced, completely out of context for us. We weren't perfect, no couple was, but I had never imagined things were bad enough for this. "Wait, what?" I stammered, trying to process what I just heard. "Emma, what are you talking about? A divorce? Where is this coming from?" "I've made up my mind," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "I don't want to discuss it with you. If you have questions, speak to my lawyer." "Your lawyer?" I repeated, my chest tightening. "You've already spoken to a lawyer?" "Yes," she said simply. "You'll be hearing from him soon. Don't try to call me, Nathan. This is final." "Final?" I echoed, my voice rising. "Emma, this is insane. At least give me an explanation. What happened? What did I do wrong?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and for a moment, I thought she might relent, that she might offer some insight into this sudden declaration. But when she finally spoke, her voice was as cold and detached as ever. "I don't owe you an explanation," she said. "This is what I want. Goodbye, Nathan." The line went dead, leaving me standing there, phone in hand, stunned and speechless. My heart was pounding, my mind racing with questions that had no answers. How could this be happening? We'd been married for 7 years, and while things hadn't been perfect, I thought we were solid. Sure, there had been some distance between us lately. She had been more withdrawn, more irritable, but I had chalked it up to stress or a rough patch. I never thought it would come to this. The drive home was a blur. My mind replayed her words over and over, each repetition adding another layer of confusion and pain. "I don't owe you an explanation." How could she be so cold, so dismissive of everything we'd shared? When I finally walked through the door of our home, the emptiness hit me like a physical blow. The house was quiet, eerily so, and the absence of her presence was palpable. I wandered through the rooms, looking for some clue, some sign that could explain what had gone so horribly wrong. But everything looked the same, neatly arranged, perfectly in place, as though nothing had changed. Except everything had changed. I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the empty seat across from me. This was where we used to have dinner together, where we talk about our day and make plans for the weekend. Now, it felt like a hollow reminder of what I had lost. Sleep didn't come that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every moment over the past year. Had I missed something? Was there a sign, a warning I had ignored? My mind was a whirlpool of doubts and regrets, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't find an answer. By morning, I was exhausted but resolute. I wasn't going to let this end without understanding why. If Emma wouldn't give me an explanation, I would find one myself. I didn't deserve to be blindsided like this, to have my life upended without warning or reason. I made a decision then and there. I would meet with her lawyer. I would demand answers, and I would uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The next few days passed in a haze of disbelief and frustration. Emma's abrupt call replayed in my mind like a haunting refrain. I couldn't focus on anything, not work, not friends, not even basic tasks around the house. Her words had left me spinning, and the unanswered questions gnawed at me. Then came the email. It was from her lawyer, a man named Henry Clark. The message was professional and clinical, outlining the steps for the impending divorce and requesting a meeting to discuss the terms. Reading it felt like a punch to the gut. Emma had really planned this. She had already moved pieces on a chessboard I hadn't even known I was standing on. I scheduled the meeting for 2 days later, a mix of dread and determination churning in my stomach. I wasn't just going to roll over and let her dictate how this ended. I needed answers. When the day arrived, I walked into the law office with my head held high, though my insides felt like they were tied in knots. The receptionist greeted me with a rehearsed smile, directing me to a conference room. Henry was already there, seated at a polished wooden table with a stack of papers in front of him. He looked up as I entered, and I caught a flicker of something in his expression. Was it unease? Guilt? Whatever it was, it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a practiced professionalism. "Nathan," he said, standing to shake my hand. "Please have a seat." I sat down, studying him. Henry was an older man, well-dressed but with an air of weariness about him. His hands trembled slightly as he shuffled the papers in front of him. "I'm sure this situation is difficult for you," he began, his tone measured. "I'll do my best to make this process as smooth as possible." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "I appreciate the sentiment, Mr. Clark, but I didn't come here to discuss logistics. I came here for answers. Why is Emma doing this? What changed?" He hesitated, his gaze dropping to the papers in front of him. "I'm not at liberty to discuss personal matters," he said finally. "Don't give me that," I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. "You've been working with my wife to dismantle our marriage, and I deserve to know why. Was there someone else? Did I do something wrong? Tell me the truth." Henry's hands stilled, and for a moment, the mask of professionalism slipped. He looked genuinely uncomfortable, his lips pressing into a thin line. "Nathan," he said slowly, "I understand your frustration, but my role here is to represent my client. That's all I can say." But there was something in his eyes, something that told me he wasn't entirely on board with the story he was being paid to tell. I leaned forward, my voice lowering. "Mr. Clark," I said, keeping my tone steady, "you're clearly a decent man. I can see it. And I can see that you're uncomfortable. Whatever Emma has told you, I'm asking you, as one human being to another, please tell me the truth." He didn't respond right away, his gaze darting to the door as though he expected Emma to burst in at any moment. Finally, he sighed, removing his glasses and rubbing his temples. "I shouldn't be telling you this," he muttered, more to himself than to me. "But you deserve to know." I held my breath, waiting. "Your wife has been planning this for months," he admitted, his voice low. "She's been working to build a case, gathering evidence to ensure she gets the majority of your shared assets. And there's someone else. She's been seeing him for a while." The words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. I had suspected, deep down, but hearing it confirmed was a different kind of pain. "Someone else," I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. Henry nodded, avoiding my gaze. "I can't give you specifics, but I can tell you that she's been very strategic about this. She's not just trying to end the marriage, she's trying to come out ahead." Anger flared in my chest, hot and sharp. Months. She had been plotting this while I worked late nights to provide for us, while I thought we were just going through a rough patch. She had been smiling to my face while stabbing me in the back. I stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "Thank you, Mr. Clark," I said curtly, my voice tight with restrained fury. "You've told me what I needed to know." He looked at me, a flicker of regret crossing his face. "Nathan, for what it's worth, I'm sorry." I didn't respond. I left the office with my mind racing, a storm of emotions threatening to consume me. Betrayal, anger, heartbreak. They all swirled together, leaving me barely able to think. But beneath it all, a new resolve began to take shape. Emma might have been planning this for months, but I wasn't going to let her blindside me any longer. If she wanted a fight, I was ready for one. As I drove home, a single thought kept repeating in my mind. This isn't over. The drive home felt like a blur, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly as I replayed the lawyer's words in my mind. She's been planning this for months. There's someone else. I couldn't decide what hurt more, the betrayal of our marriage or the calculated way Emma had gone about dismantling it. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I loved, had been orchestrating my downfall while I remained oblivious. When I arrived home, the house felt colder than ever. The walls that had once witnessed love and laughter now felt suffocating, their silence a constant reminder of Emma's absence and her betrayal. I sank onto the couch, staring blankly at the coffee table. The anger that had burned so hot in the lawyer's office was beginning to simmer into something colder, more determined. If Emma thought she could blindside me, she was wrong. I wasn't going to roll over and let her take everything I had worked for. I was going to fight back, but I needed a plan. I needed help. The next day, I called my old friend, Chris. Chris was a lawyer himself, though he specialized in business law. Still, he was someone I trusted, someone I knew would guide me honestly. When I explained the situation, he didn't hesitate. "Nathan," he said firmly, "you need to protect yourself. Emma's already taken steps to secure her position, so now it's your turn. Gather everything, financial records, property deeds, anything that shows your contributions to the marriage. We're going to build a case." Chris's confidence was a balm to my frayed nerves. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I wasn't completely alone. Over the next week, I threw myself into the task. I combed through bank statements, emails, and receipts, piecing together the financial picture of our marriage. What I found only deepened my sense of betrayal. Emma had opened a separate account months ago, siphoning money from our joint account without my knowledge. She had made expensive purchases I couldn't trace to anything in our home. And then there were the credit card charges, dinners, hotels, gifts. All of it pointed to the someone else Henry had mentioned. It was like uncovering a secret life, one that Emma had hidden behind smiles and feigned affection. The more I discovered, the angrier I became. But the anger wasn't paralyzing anymore. It was fuel. Chris and I met regularly, going over every detail. He was meticulous, asking questions I hadn't considered and helping me see the cracks in Emma's strategy. He also urged me to start documenting everything, from emails with her lawyer to any interactions we might have in the future. "She's been strategic," Chris said, his tone serious. "You need to be smarter. Stay calm, stay focused, and don't let her bait you." I nodded, committing his advice to memory. Staying calm was easier said than done, but I knew he was right. If I let my emotions get the better of me, I'd lose the advantage I was beginning to build. One evening, as I sat in my workshop sorting through old receipts, a memory surfaced. It was from 6 months ago, on our anniversary. Emma had insisted on going out to dinner at an upscale restaurant. I had been reluctant, money was tight, and I suggested something more modest. But she had pushed, and I had relented, thinking it was important to make her happy. Looking back, I realized she hadn't been happy that night. She had been distracted, checking her phone constantly and barely engaging in conversation. At the time, I thought it was work stress. Now, I wondered if she had been texting him. The thought made my stomach turn, but it also solidified my resolve. I had spent so much time doubting myself, wondering what I could have done differently. But the truth was, Emma had made her choices long before that night. And now, it was my turn to make mine. Chris called a few days later with news. "Nathan, we've got enough to push back. The evidence of her separate account and those suspicious charges, it's strong. But we'll need more if we want to dismantle her case completely. What do you suggest?" I asked, my grip tightening on the phone. "Hire a private investigator," Chris said bluntly. "If she's seeing someone, we need proof. It'll strengthen your position, especially if her relationship started before she filed for divorce." The idea made me uneasy. Spying on Emma felt invasive, wrong, even after everything she had done. But Chris was right. If I wanted to protect myself, I needed every piece of information I could get. After a sleepless night of wrestling with the decision, I made the call. The investigator, a no-nonsense woman named Diane, assured me she would handle everything discreetly. "You'll have what you need," she promised. "Just be patient." Patience wasn't my strong suit, but I didn't have a choice. For now, all I could do was wait and prepare. Emma had set this game in motion, but I was determined to finish it on my terms. As I stood in the quiet of my workshop that night, the weight of everything settled on my shoulders. The betrayal, the lies, the fight ahead. It was overwhelming. But beneath the exhaustion was a spark of determination. Emma thought she had the upper hand, but she underestimated me. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The following days tested my patience in ways I hadn't expected. Diane, the private investigator, was methodical, her updates sparse but thorough. Every evening, I waited for her calls or emails, each one bringing a mix of anticipation and dread. I wasn't sure what I wanted her to find. Proof of Emma's betrayal would strengthen my case, but it would also shatter the last remnants of the woman I once loved. Meanwhile, Chris and I continued building my defense. He was relentless, dissecting every detail Emma had used to paint me as inattentive or unworthy of our shared assets. With each piece of evidence we uncovered, bank statements, financial transfers, and receipts for lavish expenses, my anger shifted from raw betrayal to a steely determination. "She's banking on you folding," Chris said during one of our late-night strategy sessions. "She thinks you'll just let her walk away with everything because you don't want to fight. Prove her wrong." I nodded, my resolve hardening. I wasn't going to let Emma reduce me to a footnote in her new life. One evening, Diane called. Her voice was calm but tinged with something else. Urgency, maybe? "Nathan, I've got something," she said. "It's significant." I sat up straighter, gripping the phone tightly. "What is it?" "I've confirmed the identity of the man she's been seeing," Diane continued. "His name is Eric Lawson. He's a partner at her firm." The revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. A colleague, someone she worked with daily. It made sense now. Her late nights at the office, the sudden work trips, the way she dismissed my concerns as paranoia. Eric had been there all along, just under the surface of our life together. "There's more," Diane added. "I've found records of them traveling together, weekend getaways, dinners at expensive restaurants, even a hotel stay the night before she called you about the divorce." Her words felt like a second blow, but this time, they fueled my determination. "Do you have proof?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. "I do," she replied. "Photos, receipts, timestamps. Everything you'll need to establish infidelity if it comes to that." I thanked her, ending the call and staring at my phone in silence. The evidence was there. Emma's betrayal was no longer a suspicion or a gut feeling. It was a documented fact. The next day, Chris and I met to review Diane's findings. The photos were damning. Emma and Eric walking hand in hand, sharing intimate dinners, and leaving a hotel together. The paper trail was just as incriminating, with charges to their names linked to luxury hotels and first-class travel. "This changes everything," Chris said, spreading the documents across the table. "Infidelity is a game-changer in divorce proceedings. It not only discredits her, but it also strengthens your case for keeping the majority of your assets." I nodded, a grim sense of satisfaction settling over me. "What's our next move?" "We use this to confront her," Chris said. "She's been operating under the assumption that she holds all the cards. Once she realizes you know the truth, the power dynamic shifts." The confrontation came sooner than expected. Emma's lawyer, Henry, reached out to schedule a meeting, citing a need to finalize asset distribution. I agreed, knowing this was the perfect opportunity to reveal what we'd uncovered. The day of the meeting, I walked into the law office with Chris by my side. Henry was already there, his usual unease palpable, and Emma sat across from him, her expression guarded. She looked polished and composed, but I could see the cracks beneath her veneer. "Nathan," she said coolly as I entered, "I hope we can settle this quickly and amicably." I gave her a tight smile, taking my seat. "That depends on you." The meeting began with Henry outlining her proposed terms, which were as lopsided as expected. She wanted the house, the car, and a significant portion of my savings. It was as if she expected me to roll over without question. "Before we go any further," I said, interrupting Henry, "there's something you should see." I slid the file Diane had compiled across the table. Emma hesitated, her eyes narrowing as she glanced at the folder. "What's this?" "Proof," I said simply, "of your relationship with Eric Lawson. The hotel stays, the dinners, the trips, all of it." Her face drained of color, and her composure faltered for the first time. "This is absurd," she said, her voice trembling. "You had me followed?" "I had to," I replied, my tone calm but firm. "You've been lying to me for months, Emma." You've been plotting this divorce while seeing someone else and siphoning money from our accounts. Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out? Henry shifted uncomfortably in his seat, glancing at Emma with something akin to disappointment. Emma, he said quietly, is this true? She didn't respond, her gaze fixed on the file. The silence stretched, heavy and oppressive, until finally, she snapped the folder shut and shoved it away. This changes nothing, she said defiantly, though her voice lacked conviction. I still deserve my share. No, Emma, I said, leaning forward. What you deserve is accountability. And that's exactly what you're going to get. The room fell silent again, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Chris gave me a subtle nod, signaling that we had the upper hand. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt like I was in control. Emma's betrayal had brought me to my knees, but I was done being her victim. It was time to fight back, and I wasn't going to stop until I reclaimed what was mine. The silence in the room was deafening as Emma stared at the closed folder. Her once confident demeanor was crumbling before my eyes, and I couldn't help but feel a grim satisfaction. For weeks, I had been blindsided by her coldness, betrayal, and calculated moves. Now, the tables were turning. Chris leaned forward, his calm voice breaking the tension. Emma, it's clear that your actions have created an entirely new dynamic here. Before we proceed further, I suggest you take a moment to reconsider your position. Her lawyer, Henry, looked visibly uncomfortable, shifting in his seat as he glanced between Emma and the damning evidence on the table. Emma, he said carefully, this information significantly impacts our case. I think we need to have a private discussion before continuing. Emma's head snapped toward him, her eyes blazing. There's nothing to discuss, she hissed. This is a smear tactic. He's trying to punish me for wanting out of a broken marriage. I raised an eyebrow, my voice calm and steady. Emma, you can spin this however you want, but the facts don't lie. You've been siphoning money, hiding assets, and having an affair. That's not a broken marriage, that's betrayal. Her face flushed, but she didn't reply. I could see the wheels turning in her head as she tried to regain control of the situation. But there was no coming back from this. The evidence was irrefutable, and her lawyer knew it. Mr. Clark, I said, addressing Henry directly, you've been operating under the assumption that Emma has been truthful with you. Now that you know the full story, I trust you'll advise her accordingly. Henry nodded stiffly, his discomfort palpable. Nathan, I assure you, I was not aware of these circumstances. I will need to review this evidence in detail and discuss next steps with my client. You do that, Chris said smoothly, sliding another document across the table. In the meantime, here's a revised proposal for the division of assets. It reflects the reality of the situation, including Nathan's contributions to the marriage and Emma's recent actions. Emma snatched the document, her hands trembling as she scanned the terms. This is outrageous, she exclaimed. You think I'm going to walk away with nothing? After everything I've put into this marriage? Chris remained unfazed. The terms are fair, considering the circumstances. You'll still receive a settlement, but it won't be the windfall you were hoping for. Emma's jaw clenched, and for a moment, I thought she might argue further. But the weight of the evidence, and her own guilt, seemed to crush her resolve. She slumped back in her chair, glaring at me with a mixture of anger and despair. This isn't over, she muttered, but her voice lacked conviction. I leaned forward, meeting her gaze head-on. You're right, Emma. It's not over. But for the first time, I'm the one in control, and I'm not going to let you manipulate me anymore. The meeting ended shortly after, with Henry assuring us that he would review the evidence and get back to us with a revised counteroffer. As Chris and I left the office, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't just reacting to Emma's moves, I was taking the lead. Later that evening, as I sat in my workshop, I replayed the day's events in my mind. The confrontation had been draining, but it had also been empowering. I had spent weeks feeling like a victim, blindsided and powerless. Now, I saw a path forward. Emma's betrayal had been calculated, but she had underestimated me. She thought I would fold, that I would let her take everything without a fight. But she was wrong. I wasn't just fighting for my assets or my dignity. I was fighting for myself, for the man I had been before her lies tore me apart. Chris called the next day with an update. Henry reached out, he said. They're willing to negotiate. It seems Emma's finally realized her position isn't as strong as she thought. I nodded, a grim smile tugging at my lips. Good. Let's make sure the terms reflect the truth. As the days turned into weeks, the negotiations continued. Emma's bravado faded with each passing meeting, replaced by a simmering resentment. She knew she had lost the upper hand, and while she wouldn't admit it, I could see the regret in her eyes. One afternoon, during a particularly tense meeting, she finally broke her silence. You think you've won, she said bitterly, but you'll never understand why I had to do this. I stared at her, my expression unreadable. Maybe I won't, Emma, but that doesn't excuse what you did. Her eyes flashed with anger, but she didn't reply. The conversation ended there, and I left the meeting with a sense of closure I hadn't expected. Emma's words no longer had the power to hurt me. I had seen the truth, and I was stronger for it. By the time the settlement was finalized, I felt like a new man. The terms were fair, and while I had to part with some assets, I retained the majority of what I had worked so hard to build. More importantly, I walked away with my dignity intact. Emma's plans had collapsed, and though the fight had been brutal, I had emerged stronger. The marriage was over, but my life was just beginning. The finality of the settlement brought a strange sense of peace. As much as I had fought for fairness, the process had been grueling, and I was relieved it was finally over. Emma had signed the documents, her plans to walk away with most of our assets thwarted. What she was left with wasn't insignificant, but it was far less than what she had schemed to take. I left the courthouse that day with my head held high. For weeks, I had been bracing myself for this moment, and now that it had come, I felt lighter. The divorce had stripped away more than just a marriage. It had taken the illusions I'd clung to about Emma and our life together. But in their place, I had gained something far more valuable: clarity and freedom. Chris and I shared a quiet drink that evening, toasting to the end of a battle I hadn't asked for but had fought with everything I had. You handled this with more grace than most people would, he said, clinking his glass against mine. I hope you're proud of that. I am, I replied, surprising myself with how much I meant it. I've lost enough in this process. I wasn't going to lose my dignity too. The next morning, as I sat at the kitchen table sipping coffee, an email notification lit up my phone. It was from Diane, the private investigator. The subject line read, "Final Notes." I opened it, unsure of what more there could be. Inside was a brief summary of Emma's actions post-settlement. She had officially moved in with Eric, her lover, and the two had begun the process of consolidating their lives. They had been seen dining at high-end restaurants, traveling, and even attending company events together. On the surface, they appeared to be thriving. But Diane's closing sentence caught my attention. However, there are early signs of tension in their relationship. Sources indicate Eric has been increasingly distant, and Emma's behavior suggests she is struggling to maintain the image she worked so hard to build. I set the phone down, feeling a mix of emotions. Part of me felt vindicated. Emma's pursuit of a new life at my expense wasn't yielding the happiness she had imagined. But another part of me felt a pang of sadness. She had made her choices, and now she was facing the consequences. It wasn't my place to gloat or revel in her struggles. Instead, I focused on what lay ahead. The divorce might have marked the end of my marriage, but it wasn't the end of my story. I began reconnecting with old friends, people I had drifted away from during the years I spent trying to salvage a failing relationship. Their warmth and support reminded me that I wasn't alone, that there was still a world of connection and joy waiting for me. I also threw myself into activities I had neglected: hiking, woodworking, even trying my hand at painting. These were things I used to love, but had pushed aside to make room for a marriage that, in hindsight, had demanded far too much of me. One evening, as I worked in my garage on a new piece of furniture, I realized something profound. For the first time in years, I wasn't living for someone else's approval or expectations. I was living for myself, creating a life that was authentic and fulfilling in ways I hadn't thought possible. Chris called a few weeks later, his voice full of energy. "How's post-divorce life treating you?" he asked. "Better than I expected," I admitted. "It's strange, but I feel free." "That's how it should feel," he said. "You've been through hell, Nathan. But you came out the other side stronger. Don't lose sight of that." I smiled, appreciating his words. He was right. The experience had been painful, but it had also taught me invaluable lessons about resilience, self-worth, and the importance of surrounding myself with people who truly cared. As the weeks turned into months, the scars of the past began to fade. I heard less and less about Emma and Eric, their lives drifting further from mine. Occasionally, someone would mention seeing them, their relationship marked by tension and cracks in the facade. But I didn't dwell on it. Their story was no longer my concern. Instead, I focused on my own narrative. I invested more time in my woodworking business, growing it into something I could be proud of. I traveled to places I'd always wanted to visit, reconnecting with the adventurous side of myself that had been buried for too long. And, slowly but surely, I began to open myself up to the possibility of new relationships, not to fill a void, but to share the life I was building with someone who truly valued it. One evening, as I stood on a quiet hill overlooking the city, the sunset painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, I felt a profound sense of peace. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. Emma's betrayal had once seemed like the end of everything, but now, it felt like the beginning of something far greater. I had reclaimed my life, and for the first time in years, it felt like my own. Months passed, and the weight of the divorce began to dissipate like a fog lifting after a long storm. Each day brought a little more clarity, a little more freedom. The scars Emma had left were still there, but they no longer ached the way they once did. Instead, they served as reminders of what I had endured and overcome. I had been spending more time in my workshop, turning my passion for woodworking into a growing business. Orders were coming in steadily, and each completed piece felt like a small victory. Creating something beautiful out of raw materials was therapeutic, a tangible way to rebuild what had been broken. One afternoon, I received a call from Diane, the private investigator who had played such a pivotal role in uncovering Emma's betrayal. I hadn't heard from her since the divorce was finalized, so her name on my caller ID piqued my curiosity. "Diane," I greeted her. "What's on your mind?" "Nathan," she replied, her tone measured. "I wanted to give you a heads up. I've been keeping tabs on Emma and Eric, per our initial agreement, and things aren't looking good on their end." I sighed, unsure how much I wanted to know. "What do you mean?" "They've been arguing frequently," Diane explained. "It seems Eric isn't as committed to their relationship as Emma believed. There are rumors that he's been seeing someone else." I wasn't surprised, but hearing it still left me with a bittersweet taste. Emma had built her new life on a foundation of deceit, and now that foundation was crumbling beneath her. I thanked Diane for the update and ended the call, my thoughts swirling. Part of me felt vindicated. Emma was reaping the consequences of her choices, but another part of me felt a pang of sadness. No matter how much pain she had caused me, I didn't wish this kind of turmoil on anyone. Betrayal was a wound I knew all too well. That evening, as I worked on a custom dining table in my workshop, I reflected on how far I had come. The anger and heartbreak that had consumed me in the early days of the divorce were gone, replaced by a quiet strength. I no longer needed to dwell on Emma's choices or the life she had chosen. My focus was on my own path. A week later, I ran into an old friend, Sarah, at a local market. She was someone I had lost touch with over the years, a casualty of the isolation that came with trying to hold a failing marriage together. Seeing her felt like reconnecting with a piece of myself I had forgotten. "Nathan," she exclaimed, her smile genuine. "It's been ages. How have you been?" We spent the next hour catching up, talking about everything from my woodworking business to her recent travels. There was an ease to our conversation that reminded me of simpler times, before life had become so complicated. As we parted ways, she handed me her number. "Don't be a stranger this time," she said with a wink. "Let's grab coffee soon." I smiled, tucking the piece of paper into my pocket. For the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of hope, not just for companionship, but for the possibility of building something new with someone who truly valued me. Meanwhile, Emma's life continued to unravel. News reached me through mutual acquaintances that her relationship with Eric had officially ended. He had moved on, leaving her to pick up the pieces of a life she had once been so eager to create. I heard whispers of her struggles, financial difficulties, strained friendships, and a growing sense of isolation. I didn't revel in her misfortune, but I couldn't ignore the poetic justice of it all. Emma had traded stability and loyalty for fleeting excitement, and now she was left with nothing but regret. It wasn't my place to reach out or offer support. Her journey was hers to navigate, just as mine was mine. Over time, the updates about Emma grew less frequent, and I found myself thinking of her less and less. My energy was focused on building a life that was authentic and fulfilling, one that wasn't defined by the scars of the past. One evening, as I stood on my porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. The road I had traveled had been long and painful, but it had brought me to a place of clarity and strength. Emma's betrayal had once seemed like the end of everything, but now, it felt like the beginning of something far greater. I had reclaimed my life, and for the first time, I was living it on my own terms. Whatever lay ahead, I was ready to face it with an open heart and an unshakable sense of purpose. The divorce settlement marked the end of one chapter in my life, but it was far from the end of my journey. Each day brought new challenges and opportunities, and with each passing moment, I felt myself growing stronger, more certain of who I was and what I wanted. My woodworking business was thriving. Orders flooded in faster than I could keep up, and the joy I felt creating something with my own hands was indescribable. The work wasn't just a distraction. It was a passion, a tangible reminder that I was capable of building something meaningful out of the chaos that had once consumed my life. One day, as I was sanding down the legs of a custom coffee table, my phone buzzed on the workbench. It was Chris, my steadfast ally throughout the divorce. "Hey, Chris," I said, putting the sander down and wiping my hands on a rag. "What's up?" "Just checking in," he replied. "Wanted to see how you're holding up. It's been a few months since the settlement. How's life treating you?" I smiled, realizing how much lighter I felt now compared to the turmoil of the past. "Honestly, better than I expected. Business is great, and I'm finally starting to feel like myself again." "That's good to hear," Chris said. "You deserve it, Nathan. You've been through hell and back, and you've handled it with more grace than most people would." "Thanks, Chris," I said, the warmth in his words resonating deeply. "I couldn't have done it without your support." As the call ended, I reflected on how far I had come. The man I was now felt worlds apart from the one who had been blindsided by Emma's betrayal. I had learned to stand on my own, to find strength in my independence, and to embrace the possibilities of a future I was shaping for myself. That evening, I received a text from Sarah, the old friend I had reconnected with at the market. "Hey, Nathan, still up for that coffee? Let me know when you're free." I stared at the screen for a moment, a smile tugging at the corners of my lips. Sarah's text felt like an invitation, not just for coffee, but for something more. It wasn't about rushing into anything. It was about the possibility of building something genuine, free from the shadows of the past. I replied quickly, suggesting a time and place, and as I hit send, I felt a sense of anticipation I hadn't experienced in years. Meanwhile, whispers of Emma's unraveling life reached me through mutual acquaintances. Her relationship with Eric had officially ended, and with it, her once carefully curated facade had crumbled. She had been forced to downsize her lifestyle, trading in her luxury apartment for a modest rental. Her social circle had dwindled, leaving her isolated and, according to some, deeply unhappy. Hearing about her struggles didn't bring me satisfaction, but it did bring closure. Emma had chosen her path, and now she was facing the consequences. I didn't harbor hatred or resentment anymore. I simply didn't feel much about her at all. Her story was no longer tied to mine. The coffee with Sarah turned into a series of casual meetups, each one more enjoyable than the last. She had a way of making me laugh, of reminding me that life didn't have to be so heavy. Her presence was refreshing, her honesty a stark contrast to the deceit I had endured. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could let my guard down. One evening, after a long day in the workshop, Sarah joined me for dinner at my place. As we sat on the back porch, the sun setting in a blaze of orange and pink, she turned to me with a curious expression. "You seem different," she said, her tone thoughtful. "Lighter, somehow. Like you've let go of something heavy." I nodded, her observation hitting close to home. "I think I have," I admitted. "For a long time, I carried so much anger and hurt. But now, I've learned to let it go. It's freeing, you know?" She smiled, her eyes warm. "I do, and I'm glad you found that. You deserve it, Nathan." As the night wore on, I realized how much I had changed. The pain of the past had shaped me, but it hadn't defined me. I had risen above the betrayal, the heartbreak, and the chaos, emerging stronger and more resilient than I ever thought possible. Emma's choices had once felt like the end of everything, but now they felt like the beginning of something far greater. My life was my own again, and for the first time in years, I was living it fully. As Sarah and I sat together, the quiet hum of the evening wrapping around us, I felt a profound sense of peace. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to walk, and I was ready for whatever came next. The months that followed were some of the most transformative of my life. Each day felt like a step further from the turmoil of the past and closer to the life I had always wanted to live. My woodworking business continued to grow, bringing a sense of accomplishment that I hadn't felt in years. Customers praised the craftsmanship and care I put into each piece, and for the first time in a long while, I felt genuinely proud of what I was building, both in my career and in myself. Sarah and I had grown closer, too. What had started as casual coffee meetups evolved into something more meaningful. She had a way of seeing through my defenses, her warmth and honesty drawing out parts of me I hadn't realized I had buried. With her, there were no pretenses, no games. For the first time in years, I felt like I could be myself without fear of judgment or betrayal. One evening, as we sat on my back porch, sipping wine and watching the fireflies dance in the twilight, Sarah turned to me with a curious look. "You ever think about what your life would look like if things had gone differently?" she asked, her tone thoughtful. I considered her question, the weight of it settling over me. "I used to," I admitted. "After everything with Emma, I spent a lot of time wondering what I could have done differently, what signs I missed. But now, I don't think about it as much. I've made peace with what happened. It's part of my story, but it's not the whole story." She nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "That's a good way to look at it. And for what it's worth, I think you're better off now. You've grown so much, Nathan. It's inspiring." Her words warmed something deep within me, and I reached for her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "Thank you, Sarah. That means a lot." Meanwhile, news of Emma's struggles continued to trickle in from mutual acquaintances. Her once glittering relationship with Eric had disintegrated entirely, leaving her alone and scrambling to rebuild her life. She had moved to a smaller town, taking a job far beneath her qualifications just to make ends meet. The woman who had once prided herself on her social status was now a shadow of her former self. I couldn't bring myself to feel much about it anymore. Her life was hers to navigate, just as mine was mine. I had long since stopped carrying the anger and resentment that once consumed me. Instead, I felt a quiet sense of closure. Emma had made her choices, and so had I. And while our paths had diverged, I hoped, for her sake, that she would find some semblance of peace. One day, as I was finishing up a new project in my workshop, I received a message from an old friend I hadn't spoken to in years. It was a simple text. "Saw your work online. Looks amazing. Let's catch up soon." It was a reminder of how much I had gained since the divorce. New connections, renewed friendships, and a sense of belonging that I hadn't felt in a long time. The life I was building wasn't perfect, but it was mine, shaped by my choices and the lessons I had learned. That evening, Sarah joined me for dinner, and as we sat together, sharing stories and laughter, I realized how much my perspective had shifted. The Nathan who had been blindsided by betrayal, who had spent nights consumed by anger and heartbreak, was a distant memory. I was no longer defined by what I had lost, but by what I had gained and what I was creating. As the night wore on, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the fight to reclaim my life. It had all been painful, but it had also been transformative. I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more grounded in who I was and what I wanted. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of the future. Whatever lay ahead, I knew I could face it with resilience, determination, and the unwavering belief that I was capable of building something beautiful out of the broken pieces. The years after the divorce felt like a different lifetime altogether. What began as a journey through betrayal and heartbreak transformed into a testament of resilience, self-discovery, and quiet triumph. I had built a life I was proud of, one that wasn't defined by the scars of my past but rather by the lessons they had taught me. The woodworking business continued to thrive, and with each passing month, it seemed to grow into something bigger than I had ever envisioned. Customers from out of state started placing orders, and I was even approached by a boutique furniture retailer who wanted to carry my pieces. What had started as a personal passion project had become a full-fledged business, and it felt like a reflection of the stability and creativity I had regained in my life. Sarah had become an integral part of my story, too. Our relationship had grown deeper over time, built on mutual respect, honesty, and a shared understanding of life's complexities. She wasn't just a partner. She was a friend, a confidant, and a source of unwavering support. Together, we navigated life's ups and downs with a sense of partnership I hadn't thought possible after Emma. One evening, as we sat together in my workshop, Sarah watching as I worked on a new piece, she broke the comfortable silence with a question that caught me off guard. "Do you ever think about Emma?" she asked softly, her tone not accusatory but curious. I set down my tools, taking a moment to consider her question. "Sometimes," I admitted. "Not in the way I used to, though. It's more like, she's a character from a story I read a long time ago. Someone who taught me important lessons but isn't part of my life anymore." Sarah nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Do you think she ever found peace?" The question hung in the air for a moment, and I shrugged. "I hope so," I said honestly. "Not for her sake, necessarily, but because everyone deserves a chance to move on. I know I have." In truth, I had heard very little about Emma in recent years. After her relationship with Eric ended, she seemed to fade from the circles we once shared. The few updates I had received were secondhand and vague. She had taken a job at a small firm, was living in a modest apartment, and kept mostly to herself. It seemed her once grand ambitions had been replaced by quiet survival. It wasn't my place to reach out or pry further. Her story had diverged from mine, and I was content to leave it that way. Whatever path she was on, it was her journey to navigate. As Sarah and I sat together, the conversation drifted to lighter topics, the upcoming launch of a new furniture line, a trip we were planning, and the little moments of joy we had found in our everyday lives. The contrast between this life and the one I had left behind was stark, but it felt natural, as though this was where I had always been meant to end up. Months later, as I stood in my workshop putting the finishing touches on a custom dining set, I received an unexpected email. It was from Emma. "Nathan, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I wanted to reach out. I've been doing a lot of reflecting lately, and I realize how much damage I caused, how much pain I inflicted on you. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I need you to know that I regret what I did. You deserved better than how I treated you, and I'll carry that regret for the rest of my life. I'm glad to hear you're thriving. You were always stronger than I gave you credit for." I stared at the email for a long moment, unsure how to feel. Her words were sincere, but they didn't stir the emotions they might have once. I wasn't angry, nor was I particularly moved. I had already made peace with our past, and while her apology was appreciated, it wasn't something I needed anymore. I closed the email without replying, filing it away both physically and mentally. Emma's words were her own burden to carry, not mine. My life was no longer tied to hers, and I was finally free to embrace the future without the weight of the past holding me back. As the sun set that evening, casting a warm glow over the workshop, I stepped outside and looked out at the horizon. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. I had emerged from the darkness of betrayal stronger, wiser, and more sure of myself than ever before. Sarah joined me on the porch, her hand slipping into mine as we stood together in the fading light. The life I had now wasn't just one of survival. It was one of purpose, love, and quiet fulfillment. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace with everything that had brought me to this moment. 12 years. That's what the evening was about. A dozen years of promises, fights, victories, dinners, silences, mornings half filled with coffee and half lost in regret. 12 years of being Mr. and Mrs. Rowe. And I thought, naively, that tonight would mark a kind of quiet triumph. We had made it. Maybe not flawlessly, but we had endured. That had to count for something. Clarissa had picked Voluto. Said she wanted elegance. Said she wanted to make this anniversary memorable. The restaurant sat like a jewel above the city, windows curved to show the skyline in cinematic panorama, the chandeliers above us glittering like glass constellations. She loved places like this, loved being seen in them more. And she wore red, of course. Always red. Her statement color. The same shade she wore the night we met. But tonight, it didn't feel like a callback. It felt like a warning flare. She laughed too easily. Toasted too early. She leaned in too close to my ear when she clinked her glass and said, to 12 golden years, my love. But her eyes, they didn't match her voice. They didn't match the heat of her wine or the warmth of her hand resting on mine. They were somewhere else. Cold. Calculating. I pushed the thought aside, as one learns to do in marriage. You edit your own instincts. You tell yourself not to overthink, not to ruin a good moment. We were surrounded by family, my sister Marlene, her cousin Jared, our mutual friends from college. Everyone smiling, eating, laughing in the golden glow of money well spent and love well rehearsed. I wore the navy blue suit Clarissa bought me last Christmas. It fit too well now. I had lost weight without realizing it. Stress has a way of doing that quietly, like an eraser taking away bits of you. Clarissa was radiant in red. Her lipstick matched the wine in her glass. Her fingers danced when she talked, commanding attention the way a conductor pulls music from an orchestra. Everyone looked at her. Everyone always did. I used to admire that. Tonight, it felt like I was watching a performance I'd been excluded from. I stood up midway through the entrees, murmured something about the restroom. She barely acknowledged it, just offered a casual nod and turned back to Jared, who was telling a story too animated for my taste. Clarissa laughed too loud. That laugh. It had a jagged edge tonight, like a spoon clinking the wrong way against porcelain. I walked down the hallway leading to the restrooms, past the bar, the wine cellar display, and a couple whispering intensely in the shadows. The hallway itself was dim, almost atmospheric, and carried the scent of citrus and marble polish. A signature smell, I guessed. Everything about this place was curated. Everything, except what happened next. I was almost at the restroom door when I heard it. Excuse me. Sir. A voice, soft but urgent. I turned, expecting maybe a forgotten wallet or someone who mistook me for a valet. But it was one of the waitresses. Young, maybe early 20s. Her name tag read Aisha. She looked nervous, eyes darting toward the dining room before landing back on me. Yes, I said, trying to be polite, though confusion made it come out flat. She stepped closer, voice low. I know this is strange, but are you Mr. Rowe? I hesitated, suddenly aware of the pulse in my ears. Yes. She glanced around again and then said something I'll never forget. I just saw your wife put something in your drink. For a full second, I thought I misheard her. I'm sorry. I saw her drop something into your wine glass. Just a little something. I thought it was a joke or some kind of anniversary thing. But the way she did it, it wasn't right. She looked around first. Checked to make sure no one was watching. I wasn't going to say anything, but I've seen her here before. A few times. Always with the same man. Not you. I stared at her. The hallway seemed to grow colder. You're sure? She nodded, trembling a little. I wouldn't lie about something like this. My mind went blank and then flooded all at once. My stomach turned. 1,000 thoughts came crashing, disbelief, anger, denial, but none of them showed on my face. Not yet. Thank you, I said carefully. I appreciate your concern. My voice was steady. I was grateful for that. Years of business meetings had trained me to keep my tone even while fires raged inside. She looked relieved I hadn't dismissed her. I can get someone. No, it's okay. I've got it. I turned and walked into the restroom, locked the stall, and stood there gripping the metal walls like I was keeping the world upright. Clarissa, my wife, my partner of 12 years, dropped something in my drink. Something enough to alarm a stranger. Something she didn't want seen. I splashed cold water on my face until my skin stung. Then I looked at myself in the mirror. My reflection looked composed, but my eyes were beginning to see clearly for the first time in a long while. When I returned to the table, I didn't confront her. I didn't panic. I smiled, sat down. Clarissa turned to me with that practiced grin. "Everything okay?" "Perfect," I replied. And I meant it, because now I had a plan. The hallway smelled like a memory I couldn't place, maybe the polish from an old hotel lobby we once stayed in, or the artificial citrus Clarissa used to spray in the guest bathroom before company arrived. I stood there, just outside the restroom door, trying to gather myself. I didn't know what I'd expected to feel. Anger? Maybe. But it wasn't that. Not entirely. It was disorientation. Like I'd stepped off a curb and missed the ground. Then came the voice. "Excuse me, sir." "Mr. Rowe." I turned, still locked in my thoughts, and there she was, Aisha, the waitress. Thin, young, dressed in all black with a white apron slightly wrinkled around her waist. Her posture gave her away before her words did, shoulders slightly curled in, as if bracing for disbelief. "Yes," I asked, keeping my tone polite, neutral. She looked down the hallway, toward the dining room, then back at me. "I know this is strange, but I just saw your wife put something in your drink." My breath caught, and for a split second, I felt like the hallway stretched. My brain stalled between believing her and defending Clarissa out of instinct. But Aisha didn't waver. Her voice quivered, but her eyes didn't. She looked around first, she said, like she was checking if anyone was watching. Then she took something small out of her purse, like a capsule or a pill, and dropped it into your wine when no one was looking. I didn't speak. I couldn't. She took my silence as disbelief, and I saw her shoulders sink just slightly. "I wasn't going to say anything," she added quickly. "I mean, people do weird things, right? Sometimes it's part of a joke or a surprise. I don't know. But the way she did it, her whole vibe, it was off. Cold. Focused. Like she'd done it before." I still hadn't spoken. I think I was afraid that if I said something, it would confirm this was real. That the warning wasn't just a misunderstanding. That the life I thought I was living had a crack in the foundation I could no longer ignore. "Why are you telling me this?" I finally asked. "Because you looked like you didn't know," she said. Simple as that. "And I wouldn't be able to sleep tonight if I stayed quiet." That's what did it. That last line. Something about the tremble in her voice and the clarity in her eyes. She wasn't lying. She was scared. Not for herself, but for me. And she had no reason to make any of it up. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. "You did the right thing." I didn't see what it was exactly, she added. Just that it dissolved fast. Like powder or something. I could be wrong. "You're not," I cut in, gently. "I believe you." Her shoulders softened a little. "I should get back before someone notices. But if you, I don't know, need anything, I'll handle it," I said again. And then she was gone. I stood alone for a while, staring at nothing. My hand reached for the restroom door again, but I didn't open it. I didn't need the bathroom anymore. I needed a plan. I walked slowly back toward the dining room, heart thudding. The hallway seemed longer now. Or maybe I was walking slower because something in me had changed. Clarissa, my wife, had put something in my drink. At our anniversary dinner. Surrounded by people we both knew, trusted, laughed with. She picked the restaurant. She picked my suit. She picked the wine. She picked the night. But she didn't expect me to find out. As I stepped back into the glow of the chandeliers and conversation, it felt like I was stepping onto a stage. Everyone was still there. Still laughing. Still drinking. My chair sat politely empty, waiting for me like a loyal dog. Clarissa turned and smiled, beautiful and composed, like a woman who had everything under control. She patted the back of my chair. "Everything okay?" I smiled back. "Perfect." I sat down, glancing at the table. 2 wine glasses, mine still full, untouched. Hers, half sipped. I looked at them the way a surgeon studies an X-ray. One of them held a truth she didn't want me to swallow. One of them held my turning point. I nodded along to Jared's joke, laughed even. Then, when no one was looking, I made the switch. Under the table, smooth and practiced, I swapped our glasses. The stem trembled in my hand for just a second, but I steadied it. Clarissa was mid-sentence, too caught up in a story about Venice or Rome or whatever other city she pretended to have fallen in love with on Instagram. She didn't notice a thing. My sister, Marlene, caught my eye across the table. Her brow furrowed just slightly. I gave her a small shrug, like I was just adjusting my glass. The show must go on. And it did. Clarissa smiled at me. I smiled back. I raised the glass that had been hers. To 12 golden years, I said again, this time louder. Toastworthy. She raised what had been my glass. Clink. Cheers. She took a sip. I watched her closely, but casually. Pretended to look at Jared as he launched into another story, but my eyes never really left her. The first few minutes, nothing changed. Clarissa was radiant as ever. Laughing, smiling, speaking fluently, easily. But I was watching for what came next. Because I no longer trusted the surface. I sat back, hands calm on my lap, heartbeat steadying as the seconds ticked. 10 minutes passed. Then her blink slowed. Just barely. Her grip on the stem of the wine glass loosened. Not enough to drop it, but enough that I noticed. Her face twitched in a way that didn't belong. And I knew. It wasn't in my glass anymore. It was in hers. And whatever she meant for me was now working its way through her own veins. The moment I made the switch, time seemed to crawl. It was a simple motion, really. One hand brought my glass toward me, the other slid hers into its place. No grand gesture. No clinking or sloshing. Just a smooth, deliberate act that wouldn't draw attention unless someone was already suspicious. But even then, it would just look like a distracted man correcting the position of his drink. Nothing more. The perfect lie, hidden in plain sight. Everyone at the table was lost in chatter. Jared was still mid-story, something about a business trip to Milan that no one asked about. Clarissa had leaned slightly into his direction, her laugh syrupy and light, her body angled just enough to seem engaged. And yet, she threw me a glance. Just one. A casual flick of the eye, as if to say, "You're watching, aren't you?" That glance alone made my throat tighten. I took the first sip from the glass she intended for me, forcing a natural smile as the wine touched my lips. Rich. Red. No grit. No taste of deceit. Nothing that screamed danger. I swallowed once. Carefully. Then set the glass down and waited. That single sip felt like holding my breath underwater. I didn't know what she had dropped in. Didn't know how quickly it worked. But I knew one thing. Whatever it was, she had meant for it to reach my bloodstream. Clarissa mirrored me. Raised her glass, now mine, and drank from it. A full sip. Confident. Her smile bloomed like a practiced act. To 12 more, she said. May they be even better. To 12 more, I echoed. Marlene watched me closely. I saw it in the way she tilted her head, brows slightly drawn. She always read me too well. But I gave her nothing. Just the smile of a man surrounded by love and laughter, celebrating another year of partnership. I didn't know how much she had heard or guessed. But her eyes narrowed for half a second too long. She would ask questions later, and I'd have answers ready. 10 minutes passed. Clarissa didn't falter. She chatted with Jared. She complimented the wine. She leaned in to whisper something to her cousin Lena that made her giggle. For a moment, I felt like the whole thing had been a hallucination. Maybe Aisha was wrong. Maybe Clarissa dropped a mint or a vitamin or some romantic prank meant to surprise me. My heart started to ease. And then it began. It was subtle. Too subtle for anyone else at the table to notice. But I was watching. Her left eyelid twitched. She blinked twice. Slow. Then again, rapidly. I pretended to wipe my mouth with a napkin, using the gesture to cover how closely I was studying her. Her hand hovered near the wine glass, but didn't lift it again. Her fingers wavered, like the stem was heavier than it should have been. Jared asked her a question. Clarissa smiled, opened her mouth to respond, and stopped. Just for a second. Her jaw clenched. Her throat moved like she was swallowing something thick. I looked away to keep from staring. My heart thudded in my chest like a drumline on parade. The panic I'd been bottling now roared inside me. Not panic from fear, but from confirmation. This was real. This was happening. She had drugged my wine. And now, she was tasting the result. Marlene leaned in, subtle as always. "You good?" she murmured. "Yeah," I replied smoothly. "Just full. Might step out for some air soon." Clarissa let out a low chuckle, the kind that didn't belong in the moment. A beat late. Her head swayed slightly, but she caught herself. Her smile didn't quite recover after that. Her lips parted as if to say something, then closed again. She looked around the table. Her eyes landed on me. And for the first time all night, she truly saw me. Not the version I was presenting. Not the doting husband or the naive fool. She saw me. The man who knew. The man who had switched the glasses. The man who had returned from the restroom changed. Her mouth opened again. "Is it hot in here?" she mumbled, voice thinner than before. Jared turned. You all right? Clarissa raised her hand slowly, touched her temple like someone easing a headache into submission. Just a little dizzy. Maybe the wine's stronger than I thought. No one laughed. Not this time. She tried to stand. Her napkin fluttered from her lap to the floor. Her heel caught the leg of the chair. Her body tilted, but not dramatically. Just enough that her posture no longer looked deliberate. Her weight leaned too far forward, and for a heartbeat, she hovered like a tree too weak to stay rooted. Then she collapsed, slow, surreal, folding back into her seat before sliding to the floor. The room changed instantly. Chairs scraped. Silverware clinked as hands flew to mouths. Someone gasped. Someone else stood and reached for their phone. Clarissa, Jared barked, kneeling beside her. Her eyes fluttered. One arm sprawled against the floor, her other twitching at the elbow. The wine glass tipped off the table, rolling once before spilling red into the ivory cloth like blood into snow. I didn't move at first. Then I stood, slowly, with deliberate calm. Call an ambulance, I said. My voice was steel. No one moved faster than Aisha. She had appeared from the hallway, already pulling out her phone. Her hands didn't shake. In that chaos, I watched everyone's face. Jared's horror, Marlene's sharp suspicion, Lena's confusion. But Clarissa's, hers was something else. Her gaze locked on mine, pupils dilated, lips parted. There was something there. Not just panic, realization, and fear. Not of the pain, not of the collapse, but of me. Her plan had failed. And now, she knew I knew. Clarissa's fall wasn't dramatic. It wasn't the kind of scene that gets gasps in a movie. It was quiet, controlled at first, like her body was trying to maintain dignity even as it betrayed her. One moment she was sitting upright, the next, she was slumped to the side, slow, graceless, helpless. Her hand had reached out, but not in time. The stem of the wine glass slipped from her fingers and tipped over, spilling Bordeaux like blood across the pristine ivory tablecloth. Jared caught her before she hit the floor completely, but not without a stumble. Clarissa, he said, voice pitched high with alarm. He shook her shoulder gently. Hey, talk to me. My sister Marlene stood up abruptly, knocking her chair back. What's happening? She asked no one and everyone all at once. Clarissa tried to speak. Her lips parted, and her throat moved, but the words never arrived. Her eyes fluttered. Not a blink, just erratic, uncoordinated movement. She looked drugged. Or worse. Her right hand twitched near her thigh, then curled in on itself as if retreating from whatever force had taken over. I stayed in my seat a moment longer. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to see how everyone else would react. Maybe I wanted to be the last to rush in, just to mark the distance between who I had been before and who I was now. She said she felt hot, I offered calmly. Just before she collapsed. That was technically true. She was fine a minute ago, Jared said, still crouched beside her. His face looked pale under the chandeliers. She was laughing. Toasting. Yes, I said. She was. I stood then. Slowly. Not with urgency, but with control. The table was in full disarray now. Chairs pushed back. Utensils knocked sideways. The red stain on the tablecloth spreading like a shadow. Clarissa groaned faintly. Her head lolled against Jared's arm. Her eyes blinked, unfocused. Then, for a second, they found mine. And held. That look, it froze something inside me. It wasn't a plea for help. It wasn't even surprise. It was closer to comprehension. Like she knew exactly what had gone wrong. Like she knew she'd failed. I crouched beside her, opposite Jared. Clarissa, I said gently, taking her limp hand. It felt warm and clammy. Can you hear me? No response. Someone call an ambulance, Marlene said, her voice sharp now. Now. I'm on it. Aisha yelled as she sprinted from the hallway, already on her phone. Good girl, I thought. Clarissa's head turned slightly at Aisha's voice, a flicker of something passing through her glazed expression, fear, maybe, or recognition. Did she realize that Aisha had seen her? That Aisha might have been the thread that unraveled this entire night? I kept holding her hand. Part of me hated her in that moment. Part of me still loved her. But mostly, I just stared at her and waited to see if the poison would speak louder than her lies. The restaurant staff rushed in next. One of the managers knelt beside me and asked a series of questions. Was she diabetic? Allergic to anything? Had she had medication with the wine? I answered what I could. Jared answered the rest. His voice was too frantic, too familiar. I filed that away for later. She's breathing, someone said. Pulse is there, but weak. I nodded, lips pressed together. My hand never left hers. I wanted her to feel that. I wanted her to feel me there, watching, knowing, holding her through the very storm she'd planned for me. The ambulance arrived in what must have been 10 minutes but felt like 20. Flashing lights through the tall windows, medics rushing in with quiet efficiency. They rolled her gently onto a stretcher. She groaned again, tried to speak, but her words came out slurred, almost unintelligible. I followed them out the door, one step behind. Not the grieving husband. Not the panicked partner. Just a man walking beside a mystery that had begun to crack open. I could hear the whispers behind me as we passed tables of stunned diners. Some recognized us. Some just stared. I didn't care. At the curb, the medic asked, "Are you riding with her?" I hesitated. "No," I said. "I'll follow behind." He nodded and climbed in. The doors shut. The sirens stayed off, but the lights spun red against the pavement. And just like that, Clarissa was gone, swept away into the night by professionals who had no idea they were treating a woman who had tried to erase her husband over appetizers and wine. I turned and found Aisha standing behind me on the sidewalk, arms wrapped tightly around herself. "Thank you," I said. She looked like she wanted to disappear. I didn't know what else to do. "You did exactly what you were supposed to." Her eyes searched mine. "Are you okay?" I didn't know how to answer that. "I will be." Then I got into my car, sat in the driver's seat, and stared at the steering wheel. My hands were shaking now. Not violently, but enough. Enough to remind me I wasn't invincible. That this night had veered into something too surreal to grasp. The engine purred as I started the car. I pulled out slowly, following the red and blue strobe ahead. Clarissa had made her move. Now it was my turn. Hospitals have their own kind of silence. Not peaceful, not restful, but a silence filled with the hum of fluorescent lights and the constant rhythm of machines keeping track of someone's failing body. I sat in the emergency room lobby, still wearing that wine-stained suit like it was a shell I couldn't step out of. My tie hung crooked. My hands, once steady, were now laced together, knuckles pale. Everything smelled like antiseptic and old coffee. Too clean to be comforting. Clarissa was in the back. Unconscious. Stable, they said. The nurse at the desk had assured me 3 times that she was being monitored. Vitals were holding. Whatever she'd ingested hadn't killed her. Yet, I couldn't stop replaying it all in my head. The clink of the glass. The moment her eyes locked onto mine before she fell. The way she hadn't asked me for help, hadn't reached toward me. It wasn't panic. It was recognition. And underneath it, maybe something uglier. Maybe she knew the drink she'd laced had found its way back to her. Marlene had followed me here and now paced the waiting room like a restless shadow. Her heels clicked with purpose on the tile floor. "You haven't said anything," she murmured. "Not really. I'm thinking." "About what?" I didn't look at her. "What happens next?" Aisha had called in a report. The restaurant had handed over security footage. But it was all still noise in my head. I needed something solid. Something that couldn't be twisted. "Do you still believe it was her?" Marlene asked, stopping in front of me. "That she did something to your drink?" "She didn't deny it," I said quietly. "She didn't have the chance." Marlene didn't speak after that. She just sank into the chair next to me. We waited. Eventually, a woman in plain clothes and a badge stepped into the room. Detective Rosario. Late 40s, probably. Sharp eyes. No-nonsense voice. She scanned the room, spotted me, and walked over. "Mr. Rowe." "Yes. Can we speak privately?" Marlene stood. "I'm his sister." Rosario gave her a nod, then looked at me again. "What you share now could factor into an open investigation. You understand?" "I do." She led me down a hallway into a side consultation room. Bare walls, a whiteboard with nothing on it, and 2 plastic chairs that didn't belong in any place claiming to be humane. I sat. "We ran toxicology," she began, flipping open a slim black notebook. "Your wife ingested a moderate dose of something called benzoprex. Know what that is?" "No." "It's not common. It's used in some research trials to paralyze the voluntary muscles temporarily. Doesn't kill. But depending on how it's mixed or consumed, it can cause significant loss of motor control, slurred speech, confusion, collapse." I said nothing. She studied me. "You didn't drink your wine?" "No." "Why?" I inhaled, then let the breath go slow. "A waitress, Aisha," she pulled me aside on the way to the restroom. "Told me she saw Clarissa put something in my glass. Said it looked like powder." That she hesitated. That she'd seen Clarissa there before, with another man. Rosario blinked. "You're saying she tried to poison you?" "I'm saying she didn't expect to be seen." And you, what? Switch the glasses. I nodded. Yes. You realize how this sounds, right? I do. There was a pause. Rosario jotted something down. The waitress has given a statement. Restaurant is cooperating. Footage is being reviewed. If there's evidence to back this up, Mr. Rowe, this becomes a criminal matter. I understand. She leaned forward. You're lucky. If you drank that glass. I know. I cut in. I wouldn't be sitting here. She sat back, lips tight. We'll run forensics on the glass and bottle. The lab's already notified. We'll need your official statement, possibly a deposition. You prepared for that? Yes. Rosario nodded slowly, closed her notebook. You've been calm through all this. I met her eyes. Because panic comes later. She stared at me for a second longer, then stood. We'll be in touch. When I stepped back into the waiting room, Marlene rose. Well, they're investigating. It's not a joke anymore. She nodded. What now? I go home. You're not staying? She won't wake up until morning, and even then, what would I say to her? You'd ask her why, Marlene said. But I didn't need to. I already knew. I left the hospital just past midnight. The parking lot was mostly empty, lit by orange streetlights that made everything look more fragile than it was. I climbed into the driver's seat, gripped the wheel again, and sat in the dark for a long time. The inside of the car was silent. No music, no talk radio, just my breathing and the soft tick of the cooling engine. What would drive someone to drug their own husband? Hate? Desperation? Greed? Maybe all of it. Maybe more. But I wasn't done yet. I wasn't going to sit back and let this become another mystery people whispered about. I was going to dig until the floorboards of our marriage gave way and showed me exactly what Clarissa had been hiding. The next morning, I would wake up and start searching. And I had a feeling I wouldn't have to look far. The next morning felt foreign, like I'd woken up in a body I hadn't earned. I didn't sleep. I laid on top of the covers, still in the same suit, the smell of wine and hospital antiseptic clinging to me like a second skin. I watched the ceiling slowly shift from black to gray to that pale blue that only comes when the sun rises reluctantly. Clarissa wasn't beside me. For the first time in 12 years, I didn't have to pretend not to feel that. When I finally moved, it wasn't dramatic. No slamming doors, no pacing. I just stood, stripped off the ruined clothes, and showered like I was washing someone else's skin. The hot water helped, but not much. What I needed now wasn't comfort. It was clarity. I dried off, dressed in something plain, and went straight to our shared home office. Clarissa never let me into her side of it. She claimed it was her sanctuary. She also said the same thing about her car, her phone, her half of the closet. I used to think it was a boundary. Now I saw it for what it was: containment. Segregation of truth. She'd carved out entire compartments of her life where I wasn't allowed. Not anymore. The office was too neat. Her drawers, too well organized. The kind of sterile perfection only someone hiding something maintains. I started with the obvious, her desk, her locked file cabinet. She never let me have the key, but she also wasn't creative enough to hide it somewhere clever. I found it taped under the bottom drawer. Inside were standard documents, old tax forms, spa invoices, travel itineraries. But behind those, tucked between two charity event flyers, was an envelope labeled Sunset Contingency. That name alone chilled me. Inside were several documents, crisp and cold. The first was a medical release form, one that allowed Clarissa to make decisions on my behalf in the event of incapacitation. The second was a notarized power of attorney. But what froze me was the signature. Mine. Except I never signed it. It was a copy of my handwriting. Close. But the R in my last name curled the wrong way, and the spacing was off. She had forged it. The next paper was a transfer of ownership document for the house. My name replaced with hers on a preliminary deed form. Not yet filed, but ready. My heart pounded as I moved to the tablet she sometimes left in the living room. It was synced to her email she'd never bothered to sign out because she assumed I'd never snoop. I tapped the icon. No password. Her inbox opened like a trapdoor. I searched for Sunset. Only one result. A chain of emails between her and someone named Anika West. At first glance, they looked professional. But the tone was too casual. Too familiar. Clarissa, he thinks this year is about renewal. It's really about conclusion. Anika, the account is almost ready. Once the transfer is in, we'll use the POA. Just need the final trigger. Clarissa, he's getting slower. I'll time it with the anniversary. Keeps the story clean. I stopped breathing. Final trigger? Account transfer? She wasn't planning to leave me. She was planning to remove me. Financially. Legally. Quietly. There was another message. This time to Jared. Clarissa, don't reach out for 72 hours unless it's done. We need distance. You know how this works. Done. Distance. 72 hours. That smug cousin, the one making jokes at dinner, had known. Had helped. I felt the heat rise in my chest, behind my eyes, boiling into rage that I had to keep sealed for now. I clicked on the profile picture beside Anika's name. A professional headshot popped up. Blonde. Mid-40s. Cold smile. Financial consultant. I looked her up on my phone. She had a company registered out of Belize. Offshore financial services, asset protection, wealth migration. The kind of woman you hire when you don't just want to start over, you want to erase someone else to do it. Clarissa had been working with her for months. She had moved money into an account I didn't know existed. She had forged signatures, drawn up contingency documents, coordinated with Jared. And the plan was simple. Poison me just enough to trigger legal guardianship. Claim mental breakdown or illness. File the documents. Transfer the assets. Disappear. Not a divorce. An execution in slow motion. I stood up from the desk and looked around our house. No, my house with new eyes. The kitchen we renovated together. The couch she picked out. The wedding photos still hanging on the wall. A life she curated while riding my exit behind my back. I wasn't broken. I wasn't devastated. I was done. I copied every document. Printed them. Forwarded the emails to myself and backed them up to a secure drive. I called Thomas, my lawyer. Told him to meet me in an hour. He didn't ask questions. Because this wasn't going to be emotional. It was going to be strategic. Just like her. When I left the house that morning, I didn't slam the door. I didn't look back. I had everything I needed. The truth. Evidence. And a name Clarissa never thought I'd know. Anika West. 2 days later, Clarissa opened her eyes. I wasn't there. I didn't want to be. I'd already given the police everything, Aisha's statement, the forged documents, the email chains, even a copy of the medical report showing traces of benzoprex in her bloodstream. They had what they needed. Now it was about timing. Thomas called me early that morning. The district attorney's office is ready. They'll file charges by noon. You'll need to make a formal deposition by Friday. Good, I said. And her release? She's conscious now, but still under medical observation. They'll keep her at least one more night. They've assigned an officer to her door. Just one. Thomas chuckled dryly. This isn't TV. She's not a flight risk yet. But she will be. I stared out the window of his office. Downtown buzzed below, busy and blind. The city kept moving while mine had ground to a halt. She'll try to explain it away, I muttered. She always does. Thomas nodded. Let her. You've got more than enough to shut that down. Just stay calm. Calm was a funny word for the storm that had taken root inside me. I wasn't trembling anymore. I wasn't confused. But a cold certainty had taken hold, one that whispered there was no going back. By the time I arrived at the hospital later that afternoon, the detective on duty had already spoken to Clarissa. I stood outside her room for a long moment, watching through the small glass panel in the door. She sat up in bed, for in her arm, hair pulled back. No makeup. No red dress. Just a pale blue gown and eyes that scanned the ceiling like it owed her something. I pushed the door open slowly. She looked up and smiled. That was the first red flag. Hey, she said, voice scratchy but light. They said you might stop by. They? I asked. Your legal team or your co-conspirators? Her smile thinned. You're angry. I get it. I stepped inside, shut the door behind me. No, Clarissa. Angry is what I felt before I found forged documents with my signature on them. Before I learned you planned this for months. She tilted her head, wounded like always. I don't know what you think you saw. You drugged me, I said, flatly. You put benzoprex in my wine. You looked around to make sure no one saw. Unfortunately for you, someone did. She paused. The waitress. I didn't blink. Her name is Aisha. And she saved my life. Clarissa looked away. For a second, I thought I saw the truth crack through her polished mask. But then she shook her head and tried to laugh. Look, I'll admit, things got complicated. Jared and I, we were just trying to scare you. Shake you up a little. Is that the defense you're going with? I asked, stepping closer. That attempted poisoning was a shake-up? That the forged power of attorney, the offshore account with Anika West, and the emails planning my incapacitation were just an elaborate prank? Her face froze. You saw the emails. All of them. She sank back slightly into the bed, but her voice turned cold. You always underestimated me. I didn't, I replied. I just trusted you. She flinched. I leaned against the windowsill, arms crossed. You were going to put me away. Use the power of attorney to claim I wasn't well. Move the assets. Liquidate everything. And vanish. Her lips parted, but no words came out. I thought we were partners, I said, quieter now. Even when we were drifting. Even when we barely spoke. I never imagined you'd see me as disposable. Clarissa swallowed hard. You don't know what it's like. To feel stuck. You had your work, your name. Everyone respected you. I was just his wife. I wanted more. Then leave, I said sharply. Divorce me. Fight for half. You'd get it. But you wanted it all. Her silence said enough. I didn't come here to yell, I added. I came to tell you. It's over. She looked at me with something like fear now. You're pressing charges. I'm not, I corrected. The state is. Attempted poisoning. Fraud. Criminal conspiracy. You'll be arraigned after you're discharged. Tears welled up in her eyes, probably the first honest reaction I'd seen from her in years. Jared's gone, she whispered. As soon as he heard, he stopped answering. I nodded. Cowards scatter when the light comes on. She looked so small then. So defeated. But I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel revenge. I felt nothing. Which scared me more. I stood, straightened my coat, and headed for the door. Wait, she said. I turned. Do you hate me? She asked, voice fragile. I met her gaze, long and hard. No, I said. But I see you now. And with that, I left. Outside, the detective met me with a clipboard and a quiet nod. She'll be booked upon release. You did well. I just survived, I replied. He shrugged. That's more than most. By the time I got home, the sun was setting in strips of orange and violet. I stood in the kitchen, the quiet almost sacred. The kind of peace you only earn when truth finally speaks louder than illusion. The marriage was dead, but I wasn't. And now the rest of my life could begin. You don't really understand what the word scandal means until your name is printed under it in bold font. Until your inbox floods with subject lines that start with, "Are you okay?" but end with links to gossip blogs. Until people who barely spoke to you at barbecues now forward you screenshots of headlines like CEO poison plot, wife's wine plan backfires. I sat in my apartment, the one I moved into the day after Clarissa's arrest, and stared at the image they used for the article. A photo from our 10th anniversary. I had my hand on her back. She was laughing. We looked in love. People don't realize how betrayal has a face. A snapshot. A date and time. A paper trail. The article didn't get everything right. Some called it an accident. Others spun it as a botched anniversary surprise. One column suggested we were both in on it, trying to stage a viral publicity stunt for a brand I hadn't touched in 2 years. But the truth didn't need their edits. The truth had weight now. Legal weight. Paperwork and poison. Clarissa's name was redacted in some early reports, but by day 3, the dam broke. Her mugshot went public. She still had on the hospital gown, her hair pulled back in a way that made her look far more fragile than I remembered. My inbox was a war zone. Clients. Family. Reporters. College friends who hadn't spoken to me in a decade. I ignored them all. Let the silence do what words couldn't. I didn't post a statement. I didn't defend her or myself. I just logged off. I made one phone call. To Marlene. Still breathing? She asked when she picked up. Barely, I said. You see the news? Everyone has. Even Mom asked if you needed a priest. I chuckled once, short and tired. I don't need a priest. I need time. Well, you've got me. And I'm outside with groceries. I stood, walked to the door, and opened it. There she was, big sunglasses, oversized hoodie, and 3 bags of groceries that she dropped dramatically onto the kitchen counter. Thought you could use food that isn't microwaved, she said, already unpacking. And some silence that doesn't echo. I don't know how to be in this place yet, I admitted, leaning against the counter. It's clean. It's quiet. But it's not home. It will be, she said, placing eggs in the fridge. Eventually. She didn't ask me how I was feeling. Marlene knew that question was useless. Instead, she cooked. Eggs and toast. Orange juice. Silence only broken by the sound of a pan scraping gently against the stovetop. Do you remember, she said as she plated the food, that summer before you married her? When we all went to the lake house. I nodded. She was late. As usual. You waited on the dock for 3 hours. She said her car broke down. She lied, Marlene said, sitting across from me. I found out later she'd gone to a gallery opening with Jared. She just didn't want to deal with the drive. I blinked. Why didn't you tell me? Because you looked so happy when she showed up. I looked down at my plate. You think I'm an idiot. I think you were in love, she said. There's a difference. I ate quietly. She let me. The food was warm, grounding. When she left an hour later, she hugged me longer than she usually did. Keep breathing, she said. I nodded. In the days that followed, I built a rhythm. I walked more. Took phone calls again, just the important ones. I declined every interview. I filed restraining orders against 2 tabloids that showed up outside the building. I found solace in structure. Woke up at the same time each day. Read. Cooked. Slept. Repeat. I also went to every court hearing. Clarissa sat across from me, always dressed perfectly, always with her lawyer close. She never once looked at me directly. She looked past me, through me. Or maybe she couldn't bear to look at what she'd tried to erase and failed. The courtroom was always filled with murmurs. Reporters in the back. Spectators pretending not to stare. I sat straight, silent. I didn't want to fight her anymore. I just wanted the truth to finish its work. At the 3rd hearing, the judge ruled the evidence sufficient for trial. Attempted poisoning, document fraud, intent to defraud and manipulate financial assets. No one gasped. No one clapped. But I felt something shift in the air. A kind of closure. Or the beginning of it. Clarissa's attorney tried to spin the story. Said she was overwhelmed. That she feared I was emotionally distant and tried to shake me into seeing her again. No mention of Anika. No mention of Jared. Just theatrics. But I didn't need to respond. The facts stood taller than either of us. After the hearing, I stepped outside the courthouse and into the winter air. Reporters surged. I raised one hand. No comment, I said. But thank you for respecting my space. They didn't respect it, but they wrote it down. That night, back in my apartment, I opened my journal. I hadn't touched it in years. The first entry was dated 2013, the year we got married. I flipped past pages of hopes, frustrations, goals. Then I found the blank one and started writing again. She tried to end me, I wrote. But I'm still here. And I'm finally mine again. It was a Thursday morning when I found the envelope. No return address. No markings. Just my name in delicate handwriting I didn't recognize at first. It had been slid under the door, old school. No text. No email. No signature on a package app. Just paper and quiet intention. I picked it up, heart slowing the way it does when you know something matters before you even open it. I sat on the couch, the apartment still humming with the low sound of traffic outside. It had become my sanctuary, 4 walls of controlled solitude. No Clarissa. No echoes of laughter laced with ulterior motives. Just the sound of me breathing. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single page, handwritten, each letter carefully formed like the writer had been unsure if they should send it at all. Mr. Rowe, I hope this reaches you in peace. I didn't know if I should write it all, but something kept pushing me to. Maybe it's guilt. Maybe it's gratitude. Maybe both. I stopped reading for a second. I already knew who it was. Aisha. I've been meaning to say thank you, though that probably sounds backwards, considering I'm the one who spoke up. But you didn't question me. You didn't dismiss me. And in a world where people like me are often told to keep our heads down and stay in our lane, that meant everything. I sat back. The room around me blurred for a second, her words cutting through the weeks of numbness I'd been wading through. I kept reading. I didn't just see her put something in your drink. I saw her. I saw the look on her face when she did it. I knew what it meant. But I've seen things before and said nothing. Fear does that. It teaches you silence. But something in your face when you left the table, it made me speak up. You looked like a good man. And I thought, if someone like you could still be blindsided, maybe we all could. Maybe that's the danger we don't talk about. The ones closest to us holding the sharpest blades. After the news broke, I got a message. Anonymous. A woman. She offered me money to stay quiet. To recant. She didn't say her name. But she used a private encrypted email. I traced it back. I have a friend in IT at the university. He found the source. It was someone named Anika West. I folded the letter once, twice. Let it rest against my knee. So it was true. The net had been wider than I realized. Clarissa hadn't just been planning. She had hired someone to clean up the aftermath. To scrub the trail. Silence witnesses. And Aisha, barely in her 20s, had stood up anyway. I read the rest. I didn't take the money. I saved the message. Attached the logs in case the police need them. I'm studying pre-law now. Crazy, right? After everything. But something about all this made me realize how badly we need people who tell the truth, even when their voice shakes. If you ever need someone who still believes in doing the right thing, someone who still believes in second chances, I'm around. No pressure. Just, thank you for believing me when it counted. Aisha. I didn't cry. But something inside me folded, gently, not in defeat, but in recognition. That's the thing about truth. It rarely makes things easier, but it carves out space for the right kind of people to step into your life. I sat with the letter for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and scrolled to a contact I hadn't touched since I'd started my own firm. Julia Tran, head of HR at Roche Strategies. We hadn't spoken in months. I dialed. Julian, she answered on the second ring. Well, this is unexpected. I'm rehiring, I said. Internship. Legal track. I want you to draw up the offer today. Paid. She hesitated. You're coming back? No, I said. Not fully. Just making sure the right people get in. Name. Aisha Malik. There was a pause, and then Julia said, send me the details. I hung up and smiled, the first real one in a while. Later that day, I met Aisha at a campus cafe near the University Law Building. She was wearing a simple navy sweater, hair pulled back into a ponytail, books stacked beside her like armor. Didn't think you'd reach out, she said as I sat down. I owed you that much, I replied. We talked for an hour. About law. About ethics. About betrayal and courage and the terrifying things women are asked to endure when they speak up. I told her about the internship. She blinked, stunned. Why me? You saved my life, I said. She smiled, but shook her head. No, you saved your own. I just pointed to the fire. That stuck with me. Still does. When I walked away from that cafe, the world felt different. Lighter, somehow. Not healed. Not whole. But turning in the right direction. Aisha's letter reminded me of something I had forgotten in all the noise and headlines. People are watching. Even when you think you're invisible. And sometimes, if you're lucky, one of them sees enough of the truth to say something. That night, I framed her letter. Hung it by the door. A reminder that not all strangers are enemies. Some are the reason you survive. Justice doesn't come with fireworks. It comes quietly. One piece of paperwork at a time. Clarissa's sentencing was short, almost clinical. 2 years probation. 5 years barred from managing or controlling any financial assets, not even her own without court approval. No jail time. That part made people talk. She tried to poison him, and she walks free, a woman muttered as we exited the courthouse. But I wasn't there for vengeance. I'd made peace with the fact that her punishment wouldn't match the magnitude of her intent. It never does, not really. The legal system doesn't measure betrayal the way the heart does. I stood in the hallway outside the courtroom for a long time, just breathing. The building buzzed with other lives, other cases, other truths being weighed and bargained. Clarissa walked by with her lawyer, dressed in gray, her expression unreadable. She didn't look at me. I didn't expect her to. We'd passed the point of confrontation. Now we were just two people tethered by the remains of a story neither of us could rewrite. When I left the courthouse, I didn't go back to the apartment. I went to my office. Roche Strategies. It had been running on autopilot for months, thanks to my interim board and Julia's unshakable oversight. But now, with the air cleared, I wanted to walk the halls again, not just as a man who survived, but as a man who had decided to rebuild. The receptionist, new, young, nervous, stood quickly when I walked in. Mr. Rowe. Julian, I corrected. It's just Julian now. She smiled awkwardly and nodded. I walked past her and took the elevator to the 6th floor. My office door was closed. That used to bother me. Now, I was grateful for the boundaries. I stepped inside and stood for a moment, taking it all in. My desk. My books. The old photo of me and Clarissa on the shelf. I reached for it, paused, and turned it face down. Then I sat. And I started writing again. Not code. Not memos. But ideas. I had always wanted the firm to be more than just numbers and strategies. Now I had reason to expand. I launched a fund that week, the Aisha Initiative, a scholarship and mentorship program for young women studying law, especially those who showed courage under pressure. When I called her to tell her, Aisha cried. You didn't have to do that, she said between breaths. I did, I replied, because someone like you shouldn't have to be brave alone. The press latched onto it quickly. From Poison to Purpose, one headline read. I didn't care for the dramatics, but I appreciated the shift in tone. The story was changing now. Not just a man betrayed, but a man who chose to rise. I spoke at events. Quiet ones. I didn't want to be a symbol, I just wanted to be a voice. I talked about trust. About silence. About how betrayal often wears a familiar face. I told rooms full of strangers that the people you share a bed with can sometimes be the same ones holding the knife. The funny thing is, people didn't flinch when I said it. They nodded. Because deep down, we all know someone like that. I moved out of the apartment 6 months later. Bought a house across the river. Smaller. Simpler. Walls painted in soft earth tones. A kitchen with just enough space for me and maybe, one day, someone else. I didn't hang many photos. I didn't need reminders anymore. Just peace. Clarissa never reached out. Not after sentencing. Not after the article stopped. And Jared? He vanished completely. Rumor had it he left the country. I didn't care. I had let that chapter close. Marlene came over every Sunday. She brought groceries, and I cooked. We never talked about Clarissa. We didn't need to. Our silence was acknowledgement enough. One evening, she lifted her glass of wine and said, "You're different now." "How so?" I asked. "Quieter," she said. "But stronger. Like something broke and healed back smarter." I smiled. "That's what surviving does to you." "No," she corrected. "That's what choosing to live again does." I thought about that long after she left. About the difference between surviving and choosing to live. How easy it would have been to crawl into bitterness and build a home there. But I hadn't. I'd risen. Quietly. Deliberately. Without noise, but with purpose. And that, I decided, was my victory. People ask me now if I still believe in love. I do. But I believe in self-trust more. I believe in reading the silences between people. In watching the small things. How someone closes a door. How they react when you're not looking. I believe in questions that don't have easy answers, and in the strength to walk away when they're not answered at all. Most of all, I believe in listening. Because the night that was meant to end me started with a toast and a lie, but I survived it not with rage, not with revenge. I survived because I listened. Because I paid attention. And sometimes, that's all it takes to rewrite the ending.